And the number one question on our viewers' minds today, Rex, in our category called Critical World Events is, who is Brad Pitt sleeping with?
Well, I suppose. Well, no, wait a minute, Sean. We're just getting an update on breaking news. Hold on a second. It appears as though the former president of the United States, George Walker Bush, has been kidnapped. Off the wire now, I'm reading from an AP report, says that Bush was kidnapped from his ranch in Texas earlier today. Several in his Secret Service detail were shot. Now, wait a minute, folks. This is serious. This is not a joke. He's now being held by a group of self-proclaimed patriots, terrorists, I suppose, who are conducting a war crimes trial.
I thought he'd have to be tried by the International Criminal Court, Rex.
Whoa, Shauna. I thought you were pretty vapid, but no, they claim he is being tried for a violation of federal law, Section 242 of Title 18, where it's a crime to deprive someone of their constitutional right to life.
Whose life did he deprive?
You mean aside from Laura Bush's? Well, let's find out. They say they're charging him with the deaths of more than 4,000 of our servicemen and women in Iraq, those killed in action.
What about the more than 1 million Iraqi children, women, and men killed? I mean, we destroyed an entire civilization.
No legal basis, I guess, Shauna. Say, have I told you how great you look today with your new hairdo?
Well, thanks for
Wait. They're streaming the trial out over the internet, and we'll join them right now. Our technicians will work on piping this through to our studio monitors for you. Here's the audio coming up now.
Well, what about Brad?
We'll get back to that, Shauna, after the trial. Here's the prosecutor now, someone using the pseudonym of Ms. White. Let's hear what she has to say.
All oaths of office or employment, like those administered in the U.S. military or by the states or even county or city government, always draw a distinction between upholding the laws of the state, as an example, and upholding the Constitution of that state and of the United States, because the power to make laws comes only from our Constitution. It is not something we may take lightly, and I doubt many do. Perhaps for some of us in our society, this oath may mean more to us than the vows we take when we marry. It is the most binding, most daunting pledge that any of us can ever take, because to violate that pledge can carry a tremendous penalty. At its most egregious, the penalty of death. This is the pledge that the defendant took upon entering office of the President of the United States, twice took in that capacity as a matter of fact, and many times before. Now, this trial, this event in history, has nothing to do with patriotism, yet it has everything to do with being a patriot. It has nothing to do with supporting our troops, as the more than popular bumper stickers urge, yet it has everything to do with safeguarding them from the unnecessary risk of death. In other words, it is at the heart of supporting the men and women who serve in our armed forces. Some years ago, just prior to our invasion of Iraq in March 2003, we were all chastened to be good patriots and to support our troops as they put their lives on a second front line of battle in our government's quest to rid the world of tyranny, terrorism, and the potential for mass murder. Night after night, as the drumbeat leading towards invasion of Iraq strengthened, the evening news carried footage of these Kurds lying dead and decaying in the streets. Our government told us that this Hussein character had been and was developing, manufacturing, storing, and potentially deploying a variety of WMDs, and that he was harboring terrorists as well. In fact, and quite ironically, the more staunchly religious countries, the theocracies surrounding Iraq, disdained Saddam Hussein because of his secular practices, seeing Hussein as nothing more than some godless, despotic, dangerous annoyance. These are the same countries that had waged war against each other for the decades, the centuries preceding our invasion. Very shortly after September 11th and sometime before Iraq, we invaded Afghanistan in our quest to bring the well-documented, if you'll excuse the term, mastermind of the Twin Towers attack to justice, Osama bin Laden, also a citizen of Saudi Arabia, incidentally. The people who fought the Soviet communists in Afghanistan for that long, weary decade during the 1980s were those that we armed and trained. They are now the same people that we now battle every day in that country. Thereafter, we invaded Iraq. At that time, at that moment in history, we were a country still reeling from the graphic and relentless images of death. Giant planes slamming into our hallmarks of American engineering. Explosions of flames. People like you and I, leaping, hands clasped, hundreds of feet to their death, rather than face the certain and agonizing death from the infernos consuming everything within. That man gave us the means to avenge and assuage our anger, our hate, our bitterness, our very primal thirst for blood, in return from the lives taken from us. But then, something happened, something strange, and still caught in the moment of grief, that man systematically, knowingly, and with willful intent to defraud the American public, manipulated our hate and rage and turned it away from bin Laden and directed it instead towards Iraq. A developed, thriving country of people whose only apparent fault was that they permitted a deceitful, arrogant, corrupt, violent man to control their destinies. In hindsight, something which with all Americans can easily identify. The result of this calamitous international crime against an innocent people, more than 100,000 Iraqi dead. Maybe as many as 600,000 or more. Blameless men, women, children, not soldiers. What laws did he violate as a result of this despicable scheme to embroil our armed forces in a conflict that was not only a subterfuge, but also a crime against humanity? Unfortunately, only one law in our country, clearly, and that is the law against which you will judge the facts of this case and find him without a doubt guilty. Section 242 of Title 18 of the United States Code makes it a crime for a person acting under color of any law to willfully deprive a person of any right or privilege protected by the Constitution or laws of the United States. As His Honor has made clear, the matter before you here is the deprivation of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. For what? To fulfill a family vendetta? To amass huge profits for conspiring international oil corporations? To improve the bottom line of then Vice President Dick Cheney's Halliburton? To increase oil exploration opportunities for the Bush family's investment? There are no mitigating circumstances. There is nothing that that man or anyone affiliated with that man who co-conspired to perpetrate this fraud for their own financial gain can say to diminish that number. 4,432. Here they are. These are our dead. Who are they? You and I. Just as those killed on September 11th, 2001, they are Americans of every walk of life. Only in this case, the total dead approaches twice that of those we lost on September 11th. They trusted and believed that that man, their commander-in-chief, George W. Bush, would not cause them to imperil their lives, to place them in a situation where they might have to make that ultimate sacrifice without just cause. Whoever under color of any law, those words do not excuse those we elect to office, nor does it give anyone, regardless of their position in government or their family connections, a free pass to send people to their deaths under color of law. How did he do it? We will call people to testify that will describe how this travesty was foisted on the American public. Now, the defense will likely argue that the evidence that we will present through these people is at best circumstantial, but under these circumstances, the conditions in which this trial is being conducted, it will be up to you individually to decide. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Your Honor. Thank you.
Wow, that was wonderful.
It certainly was. I can't imagine what the defense will say.
This is Mr. Black, another pseudonym, and he's the defense counsel. And apparently, that is George Bush, who is hooded and shown on that monitor there in the courtroom.
Official of the United States of America, and yes,
Say that again, Shirley.
Wow. Poor man he must be. What a tyrant. What an ogre. You know, when we were children, he must have been what was lurking beneath our beds. This trial, ladies and gentlemen, is not about tyranny on the part of our government. It's not about false accusations, self-enrichment, and a bunch of backwoods theories about capitalism run amok. It isn't about international conspiracy and grand schemes to manipulate the world's oil supplies for the personal gain of some skull and bones blarney. It's about truth. It's about operating with the best information possible. It's about making decisions under the crushing weight of international responsibility when lives are in the balance. It's about a human being who was elected to the highest office in this country. What you and I do, in fact, call the leader of the free world. He's the same American who was shot and killed, wounded in every battle fought in Afghanistan and Iraq and any other place that we may find ourselves, to bring those who would see our way of life, all that we hold true and all that we hold right in our society, immediately put to death. America the Great, destroyed. Land of the free, relegated to past tense. Freedom of speech, terminated. Women in the workplace, never. Women at home, covered head to toe, without opinions, stripped of ambitions, without education, without the basic freedoms we Americans accord our dogs. If it weren't for this man, and thank God many women and men who share his beliefs, the prosecution, Ms. White, would be shut away under her husband's, let's clarify that, her master's.
Well, no man's going to be my master.
What about as a sex slave?
That's what this trial is about. A vindication of good over evil, of democracy over tyranny, of freedom over totalitarianism. The prosecution was right. There were no WMDs under Hussein's control at that moment. There was no imminent threat to our survival, as it turns out, as it happens, at that moment. Now, let me ask you a very, very important question. One that is at the heart of this trial. When the lives of millions are in the balance, on whose side do you err? On whose side? This is a simple case of simple truths, folks. I believe you'll see that. You'll see the truth. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Your Honor, thank you.
You made some valid points.
I certainly did.
Our first video testimony is from Mr. Peter Amundsen. Please begin.
He was one of the unit inspectors.
Working with Mr. Blix, we were charged by the United Nations Security Council with inspecting various targeted locations in Iraq.
In total, we conducted inspections of approximately 700 sites, I believe, of which my team had completed more than 100 of those sites.
So, after completing 700 inspections and about 500 sites, how many ready-for-use WMDs of any type did you find?
None. No weapons that were produced and waiting for use as one might expect in a functional military arsenal.
Objection, Your Honor. Calls for a conclusion on the part of the witness.
This man's name is Goddard. He is a financial
gross revenue
analyst.
for the year 2002, the year prior to our invasion of Iraq?
2002 revenue was disclosed as $12.5 billion.
So, what was 2004 revenue following prosecution of the war in Iraq at that point for a little less than 2 years?
About $20.5 billion.
$20.5 billion? That's a 64%
Shauna, that's a lot of
increase
money.
in revenue for less than a 2-year period.
Is.
From where did this tremendous 64% increase in revenue come? Do these reports list business activities and related income?
According to the company, quote, we are investing in our core business where we have a leading market position and the best growth prospects, especially in the Middle East, unquote. That was about the same time the company relocated its corporate headquarters from Texas to Dhahran, Saudi Arabia. It states, quote, Halliburton has been awarded a letter of intent by Shell Iraq Petroleum Development BV for the development of the Magnum field in southern Iraq. unquote.
Majnoon Field?
The release claims, quote, the giant Majnoon Field is one of the world's largest oil fields.
Do you note a Halliburton-parent relationship over a company named Kellogg, Brown, and Root in any of their reports?
They, KBR, have a substantial relationship with the Pentagon. From their financial statements, and if one does a little math, you'll see that KBR Inc. takes away about $1 out of every $7 the Pentagon spends in defense, being, of course, one of the largest types of expenses the Pentagon has.
Mr. W., Director of the Office of Global Communications?
Yeah, according to a Pentagon report, he was acting as an agent under the Strategic Command.
You are Mr. James W., are you not?
I am.
He's a scary-looking guy.
Here to provide testimony regarding your involvement in the months leading up to the U.S.-led incursion into Iraq.
I'm appearing here to tell you that all you fuckers are dead beat as far as I see it. Maybe in a matter of minutes.
Of course. Mr. W., where were you employed during January 2003?
You know, it'd be helpful if I could see your face instead of this distorted image.
That's not going to happen. Mr. W., now please answer my question and try to remember that your former boss's life is on the line as we speak. You may think of us as you like, but you must know that we are committed to an outcome.
Private enterprise at the time.
For what company?
What do you mean for what company?
I mean, for whom did you work?
Sounds like somebody's giving him cues in the background.
Yeah, it does.
Results.
Your Honor.
Mr. W., you are cautioned that your responses may save the life of former President Bush. In the absence of complete and truthful answers, we will be left to judge his guilt or non-guilt on what facts and evidence are presented.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. W., in January 2003, were you not appointed to the position of director for a company called the Office of Global Communication?
Yes.
And is it not a fact that this Office of Global Communication was, just prior to your appointment, created by then Secretary of State Donald Rumsfeld and approved by the defendant?
Yes.
And your office was in the Persian Gulf, is that correct?
Yes, what of it?
And your job was to disseminate information to the world press consistent with the will of the President, the Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld, and other highest level officials steering America on a path to war with Iraq.
I don't know what you mean by steering.
Let me phrase it another way then. According to a Pentagon report, acting as an agent under the Strategic Command, you were authorized to engage in presenting, quote, false information, images, or statements, unquote. Those are, I believe, the exact words, false information, images, or statements, are they not?
Taken out of context, yes.
Who is Colonel Robert
Yeah,
Miller?
this guy sweats like a whore in church, Shauna.
Gosh, Rex, I haven't been to church in years.
Wasn't he a mid-level Pentagon staffer whom you had employed during February and early March 2003 to appear in video provided to the news media?
The only people you employed first.
I didn't employ any other than the 4 staffers who worked directly for me.
I meant employ as in use. And isn't it a fact, Mr. W., that this Colonel Williams had been videotaped reciting a specific script prepared by your office citing non-existent conclusive proof of Saddam Hussein's direct relationship in the support, harboring, arming, and direction of terrorists?
I don't know which one of these questions to answer. Besides, it sounds like you've already made up your mind. This is a real kangaroo court, ain't it?
And did Colonel Williams also have concrete proof that Saddam Hussein possessed and intended to use weapons of mass destruction against the United States, notwithstanding the extensive reports filed by the United Nations Security Council?
I don't recall.
I have no further use for this witness.
You know there's no place to hide. We'll find you, we'll hunt you down, we'll track you down the 4 corners of the earth. There ain't a rock big enough to crawl out from under. We'll get you no matter how long it takes.
Edwin Hibble, Deputy Director, retired, CIA.
Another
Now,
good.
what can you tell us about Iraq?
Certainly is.
Specifically from, say, 1980 through to early March 2003 with respect to documented weaponry development, storage, and deployment?
Well, admittedly, the 1980s were rather what one might call Hussein's glory days in the use of chemical warfare. Referring to page 32 in the report, there are several documented events during the period to which you refer. In total, we have documentation supporting the extermination of far more than 100,000 innocents.
100,000 non-combatants?
Easily. Perhaps much more.
What is tailor, Mr. Hibble?
It's a clear, colorless, and tasteless liquid with a faint sort of fruity odor, a nerve agent, because it fatally interferes with normal functioning of our nervous system. It's also classified as a weapon of mass destruction by the United Nations. I like to think that it punishes before it kills.
I see.
And she's back up again. This is Ms. White in her summation to the court.
4,430. That is the number of Americans killed in Iraq. I want to read something to you. It is a report issued by RigZone, an oil industry information resource. The article's title is Iraq's Giant Majnoon Oil Field to Top Friday's Auction. It is dated Monday, December 7th, 2009. Quote, Iraq's supergiant Majnoon will be the first in the 10 groups of oil and gas fields the country is offering to international oil companies in its second post-war licensing auction due to be held in Baghdad Friday and Saturday. Timing. Such an important thing in life. It affects nearly everything we do. To be at the right moment in time at the right place. To time one's actions to coincide with the best opportunity available. Opportunity and timing. Opportunity in this case can be defined simply as oil profits. Now, obviously, from what I just read and what you've learned here, not just little profits, but potentially, quote, super giant, unquote, profits. Now, in my business, the business of bringing those who act against society's laws to justice, super giant profits equate to super giant motive. Virtual control of the world's largest oil reserves, second only to Saudi Arabia and Iran. That's quite a motive. As to timing, there were some hurdles that our then President Bush had to overcome. First, ignoring or literally overriding history to bring Hussein's 20-year-old rampage of murder of Iranians and Kurds to the forefront of the world's consciousness. Second, there were ongoing UN inspections, as you now know, centered around uncovering Hussein's alleged storehouses of weapons of mass destruction, which our president swore to us that Hussein maintained for use against the US and our allies, Hussein's neighbors. The UN inspections had run their course. No WMDs, no mustard gas, no VX gas. No nuclear missiles poised to level America, Kuwait, the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, or any of our other so-called allies, which in today's lexicon is defined as oil-rich and cooperative with the Western oil industry. But the clock was running. Timing became everything. If he did not push us into a war that would topple Hussein and his government, those immense, largest in the world opportunities would vanish. Forever, perhaps. Now, as Mr. Black has pointed out, and I concur, one can only imagine the tremendous pressure that President Bush was under in those months preceding our invasion of Iraq. Imagine having to manipulate 300 million people into believing a lie. How does one do that? How does one go about constructing a scenario with sufficient credibility to cause basically a majority of about 300 million people to say, okay? It was easy, really. 15 young men from Saudi Arabia, 2 from the United Arab Emirates, 1 from Lebanon, and 1 Egyptian, formed the foundation for this House of Lies on September 11th, 2001. But then Iraq. The clock must have seemed to run faster for President Bush. Time was running out. So with the foundation laid, he moved on. On top of the horror of 9/11, President Bush and his co-conspirators constructed a platform consisting of patriotism. Here's how a good American acts and thinks. And even those who knew better or should have known better wanted to be good patriots. We all did. We all love our country, even those whose contrary opinions were not given a voice in the months following 9/11 and preceding our invasion of Iraq. Those who cautioned us to act prudently and with careful consideration before performing an irrevocable act, love America. But their voices were silenced by the drumbeat of patriotism. I have 4,432 reasons for you to find that man guilty. You must too. No more good nights.
The last to fall in
No
Iraq,
more.
David
See you at
Emanuel
Christmas.
Hickman.
No more.
KIA, November
We love
14th, 2011.
Drive carefully. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your willingness to challenge a way of thinking that makes you unique in today's world. Thank you for setting history straight.
Boy, gee whiz, that was amazing.
Very powerful.
Very, very powerful.
And here's Mr. Black in his summation to the court.
Everyday Americans. White, black, brown, yellow, red, rich, poor, middle class. What she won't tell you is that the people who own the oil industry, the people who own stock in our oil industry, yours and mine, are everyday Americans too. Can you become a mobile oil mogul? You bet. See your stockbroker and buy in for perhaps just a few $100s of stock warrants. In America this year, about, I'd say 2.5 million people will die from an assortment of causes. There'll be heart disease, of course, cancer, automobile accidents, and for all the other reasons you and I have lost loved ones. It's a hard statistic to deal with. Death is a difficult reality. When people we love die, we look for a reason, someone to blame, someone to point the finger at. Sometimes we blame God, sometimes we blame alcohol, cigarettes, reckless actions, a drunk driver, and always we try to find someone to point the finger at. Your president, George Walker Bush, did what was right and just in this world. You knew it then, and you know it now. Through his selfless and brave actions, because of his love of America, a killer no longer lives in our midst, a man who destroyed hundreds of thousands of fellow human beings in cold blood. This man made him pay the price for his treachery. Now to find him guilty of a crime? How can that be? I'm in disbelief that he has even been charged with so heinous an act. I can't believe it. Yes, a bad man was eliminated so that he can do no more harm. Yes, 4,432 Americans gave their lives to save the lives of hundreds of thousands more, and they will always be remembered for their sacrifice. Their deaths have meaning. You cannot take that away from them. I know. You can't find this man guilty. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, thank you so much for your time. That concludes my summation.
He made a few good points, Shauna.
He did. So, guilty or not guilty?
All right, I'll tell you what. On the count of 3, you say your verdict, and I'll say mine. All right. 1, 2.
Brazen act of terrorism, what America has become.
Watching the story unfold from the very beginning, Rex, and I have to say that I am amazed that this type of thing can happen here in America.
I never thought I would live long enough to see something like this.
Somewhat veiled terms has described what appears to be the
No demands have been made.
No news yet on the missing president. His whereabouts
As a nation holds its breath.
Coming up next.
Hey, I've got you, Mr. President. I've got you. Don't you worry about a thing. You guys stay away from me and the president.